a loving father of two.
Era muy buen padre, la verdad.
He was extremely hardworking, very likable, very personable.
Is ruthlessly killed outside his home.
There was numerous gunshot wounds to his upper torso.
Whoever shot the victim was extremely angry and was sending a message.
Detectives hunt a cold-blooded murderer.
We identified the weapon as an AK-47.
He received a text message that said, "Nobody messes with me."
People were fearing for their lives because the killer was still out there.
The question starts to creep in of, is this one that may never be solved?
Then, one phone call changes everything.
He said that he was in fear for his life, for what he was going to tell us.
We thought, wow, this is the first break that we've had.
Exposing a killer no one saw coming.
It hit you in the gut. It was somebody that you just never really would have expected.
Le quitó un padre y a mí la mitad de mi corazón.
We come out here to go skiing, snowboarding, and in the summer months, it's hiking, bicycling, fishing.
It's beautiful. The weather's always sunny. There's always an outdoor aspect that is just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen.
One early fall morning in 2016 turns into a nightmare for the town of Mammoth.
Mammoth Lakes Police Department received a 911 call at approximately 1:50 in the morning, reporting just hearing a series of rapid gunfire and that a neighbor across the street had been shot.
Police and first responders race to the scene.
Patrol officers found the victim lying in the driveway, and he was lying face down in his own blood.
You had an individual who'd been shot multiple times, and the victim's wife standing there. She's hysterical.
Y yo quise abrazar a Omar, me acuerdo. Y alguien dijo, no lo toques, no lo toques. Yo le dije, pero ¿y por qué no? Si es mi esposo. Quiero saber que él esté bien.
Paramedics arrive and try to resuscitate the victim.
La ambulancia llegó rápido, pero como Omar recibió muchos disparos en el cuerpo, Omar ya había muerto cuando ellos llegaron.
Police learn the victim is 35-year-old Omar Hernandez, and a homicide investigation is launched.
When I arrived on scene, I've never seen anything like that. Omar had approximately 15 gunshot wounds to his body.
There were bullet impact marks all over. In total, there was 30 shell casings that were found.
The victim was laying alongside his vehicle. There was numerous gunshot wounds to his upper torso. His vehicle was still running. Coffee cup still laying there. All indications that he was getting ready to go somewhere.
What was also noticed was there were divots that were in the asphalt and in the driveway.
We definitely got the feeling that as the victim laid there, he was continuously being shot.
I felt like it was extremely personal. Whoever shot the victim was extremely angry and was sending a message.
The shell casings provide another surprising but valuable clue.
The caliber of the bullet that was used, that only comes from a high-powered assault rifle.
It was a 7.6 millimeter round, so we believed it had to be an AK-47. To have a weapon of that sort here in Mammoth, I thought was extremely unusual because those are assault weapons, those are not hunting rifles.
We thought it was potentially gang-related, possibly some sort of hit that somebody definitely wanted to get the job done.
Could this have been a planned execution? Detectives try to speak with Omar's wife, Gladys.
Gladys was hysterical, extremely upset, unable to talk, and she was screaming.
Estaba devastada por mi dolor, devastada por el dolor de saber que Omar había muerto. Y estaba, pues, perdida porque decía, ¿por qué? ¿Por qué le hicieron esto a Omar?
Born in 1980, Omar was raised by a single mother in Guadalajara, Mexico, but knew his destiny lay elsewhere.
O el sueño de Omar era exacto venir a Estados Unidos porque sabía que aquí había más oportunidades. Su visión era crecer, salir adelante y sacar adelante a su mamá.
When Omar was 18 years old, he headed to Mammoth on the advice of a friend, and for 8 years had been successfully working his way up at the same company.
Omar had a good job here in Mammoth. He was a supervisor at the Vaughn's grocery store, which is the main grocery store in Mammoth Lakes.
He was extremely hardworking, very likable, very personable.
At work, Omar was known to be a kind and caring, almost big brother figure to a lot of the employees that he supervised. He took them under his wing and really tried to help them feel like they belonged.
In In 2006, Omar met Gladys Gastelum, and romance quickly blossomed.
Lo conocí y amor a primera vista. Sentí que era una gran persona, un hombre increíble.
Omar and Gladys started a family, welcoming the arrival of 2 sons.
Omar, como padre, era fantástico. Era muy buen padre, la verdad.
The young family had a bright future, starting with an event planned for just days after Omar's murder.
Venía toda mi familia de México. Íbamos a bautizar a Mateo. Yo estaba emocionada por el bautizo de mi hijo y porque venía toda mi familia.
Instead of a celebration, Omar's loved ones must now organize a funeral. Looking for answers, detectives questioned Gladys about the hours leading up to the shooting.
She had gone to visit a family member, and Omar stayed home. And she came home right around 10 or 10:30 p.m. that night, and Omar was sleeping.
He was trying to get a good night's sleep before the night shift.
According to Gladys, at approximately 1:30 in the morning, Omar had gotten up, made himself some coffee, and went outside to start the car to warm it up.
Omar siempre entraba a despedirse y me dio un beso y me dijo, te amo.
And then, shortly after he exited the back door to go to work, she heard the loud gunfire that made her jump.
Se escucha una ráfaga de muchos disparos y yo me paro asustada. Yo nada más pedí a Dios que no fueran para Omar, que cuidara a Omar porque iba saliendo de mi casa.
So she got dressed really quick, ran outside, and that's when she saw Omar lying face down in the driveway.
Y empiezo a gritar ayuda, por ayuda. Y le dije al vecino, llama al 911, porque Omar no está bien, algo le hicieron a Omar, le dispararon a Omar.
When police ask if anyone held a grudge against Omar, Gladys's response is immediate.
The name of Saul Morales came up. Saul Morales had a problem with Omar because Saul had always accused Omar of having an extramarital affair with his wife, Rosalinda, who was also an employee at the Vons supermarket.
About a year or so before the murder occurred, investigators learned that Saul had actually gone to Omar and Gladys's home, trying to confront Omar over whether these affair rumors were true.
There were disputes between Omar and Saul.
Gladys tells investigators that Saul's behavior had been disturbing.
Saul had confronted her, told her that my wife is having an affair with your husband.
She noticed that he had been driving by the house on a regular basis.
Gladys says she had seen Saul drive by her house as recently as 3 days before Omar was killed. Things became so bad, Gladys tells police that Omar filed a restraining order against Saul.
That was an attempt for Omar to get Saul to stop coming to his house, stop contacting his wife.
Could Saul's jealous rage have driven him to murder?
Gladys indicated that she was afraid of Saul, and she thought maybe he was so upset over this alleged affair that he possibly could have killed Omar.
And so Saul became a person of interest pretty quickly. At that moment, we felt like, okay, maybe this is the guy.
Coming up, investigators uncover a menacing grudge.
He hated Omar,
He was there to teach Omar a lesson.
not his motive to murder somebody.
And shocking clues.
The sedan pulled over near where the crime scene occurred.
It was the same vehicle that we'd seen in the video surveillance.
The shell casing covered were fired from the same gun.
Before a surprise confession reveals a cold-blooded killer.
He described how he just continued to shoot.
Nunca imaginé que él hubiera hecho algo tan desgarrador, algo tan triste.
That was alarming. I knew right then it was huge.
Hernandez was gunned down in his own driveway. His wife Gladys has pointed police towards a possible killer.
Saul Morales was the first suspect in this case because his wife, Rosalinda, had reportedly been having an affair with Omar.
We found out that Saul confronted Omar about the affair.
Saul told Omar to leave his wife alone.
Omar was upset that Saul had come over to his house while his kids were home.
There was a fight that broke out between them and police were called.
Officers arrived on scene and they were separated. No charges were filed, but there still was a documented incident. Gladys did not believe that Omar really did have an affair with Rosalind. But the important thing was if Saul believed it to be true, then that is motive to murder somebody.
Needing more information about the alleged affair, investigators head to Omar's workplace.
The coworkers described Omar as a nice guy that got along with everybody.
The manager described Omar as a very hardworking person dedicated to the job, was that employee that worked over and beyond what was required of him.
The manager did tell me that he had heard the rumors about Rosalinda and Omar's extramarital relationship, and also he did bring up the fact that at times he would see Saul in Vaughn's walking through the aisles as though he wanted to catch Omar and Rosalinda together.
Learning Saul's wife, Rosalinda, happens to be working her shift at the store, detectives pull her aside for an interview.
She was very, very emotional.
Rosalinda found out about the murder when she came in to work and became very upset.
Investigators confront Rosalinda about the rumors.
Rosalinda denied that there was ever an affair or that there was any sexual relations between her and Omar.
She said that her and Omar's relationship was purely platonic and that her and him had been best friends, and that's the extent of their relationship.
Rosalinda definitely gave me the sense that she was nervous.
In talking to Rosalinda, she appeared to be holding back.
At this point, investigators weren't sure whether the affair was a rumor or whether it was true.
It seemed like the jealousy involved in the case could have been enough for murder. When you see a murder that gruesome, with that many bullets and that much violence, it comes out of some strong emotion.
Police know that even if Saul had motive for murder, he also needed the opportunity.
We asked Rosalinda where Saul was the previous night, and Rosalinda said that Saul was in bed with her the whole night, and then she ended up getting up for work around 3 that morning, and he was still in bed.
I wouldn't say that that particular alibi was rock solid, so interviewing him was very important just to find out if their stories matched.
Investigators bring Saul down to the station.
When I interviewed Saul, he was extremely calm, extremely courteous, and extremely cooperative.
He was very forthcoming about the altercations that had occurred with Omar in the past, and that he was afraid that Omar had had an affair with his wife.
Investigators ask Saul to account for his movements in the hours leading up to the murder.
Saul claimed that he had gone to visit his uncle, and he was with his uncle throughout the night before coming home, and went to bed right around 11 o'clock that evening.
He said that he was asleep in his bed on the night of the murder, had nothing to do with it. He voluntarily provided a DNA reference sample to exclude him.
Getting DNA from Saul was extremely important because he was a prime suspect in the shooting, and because with fingerprints coming off the bullet casings, you can match the DNA.
Saul also allows detectives to search his home.
I searched the house for weapons, ammunition, or any evidence that could tie him to the crime. But I never found anything that would lead me to believe he had weapons or ammunition in the house.
When the results come in, Saul's DNA does not match the DNA found on the spent shell casings.
His story seemed to be making sense. It seemed to be consistent. There was no indicators that he was lying to us.
And so we didn't have anything to really move on.
I didn't find him to be suspicious. He just wasn't connecting the dots for me. And from my training and experience, he did not give me any indication that he was involved in the shooting. And so that was really frustrating.
With detectives forced to put Saul on the back burner, they revisit the theory that Omar's murder could have been a professional hit.
The weapon used, the AK-47, it's a weapon of murder, a weapon of violence, and so the nature of that weapon alone made people think this has something to do with a gang.
Because of the brutal nature of the crime, something we were looking at, is this the cartel? Is this a paid hit? It's gotta be big because of the way it was done.
His home in Mammoth Lakes, California, now suspect he might have been targeted by a criminal gang.
There was speculation that maybe this was a drug deal that went bad and the cartel had come up and put a hit on Omar. Investigators went looking through Omar's background to see if there was any drug affiliations or anything that could have been tied to the organization. organized crime.
I didn't find anything in Omar's background that would indicate he had any gang association whatsoever.
No pertenecía a pandillas, él era una persona tranquila, no usaba drogas, no usaba nada.
Investigators move on from the gangland hit theory. Several days later, they discover their security camera footage from a building near Omar's home and hope the video will provide new leads.
The closest camera that had any video surveillance was several hundred yards down the street, so you were capturing vehicles coming and going.
Unfortunately, there were no cameras that were able to actually capture the crime as it occurred.
What the security footage documented was a vehicle circling the area several times prior to the shooting.
We had what we believed was a light-colored four-door sedan. We felt pretty confident that it was a Toyota Camry or Toyota Corolla. We felt like that vehicle possibly was involved.
Police spot another suspicious vehicle in the footage.
There was a red sedan-type vehicle that was seen at the intersection driving down towards the victim residence.
What was notable was it appeared less than 2 minutes prior to when the murder took place, and then the sedan pulled over near where the crime scene occurred.
Unfortunately, with the low image quality, we weren't able to identify who was in the suspect vehicles.
Undeterred, police show the footage to Omar's wife, hoping she can identify the vehicles. The red sedan provokes a strong reaction.
Gladys said that the day after the shooting, a red sedan drove by with two people inside of it that she recognized as Vaughn's employees. She did say that they gave her a slow roll type of look, as though letting her know they were watching her, or maybe they were involved.
Sentí miedo en ese momento porque cuando ellos pasan manejando y luego le hacen así, yo sentí mucho temor, sentí miedo.
Gladys told investigators that the two individuals in the car were Jose Antonio Correas Vasquez and Eliud Correas Vasquez. They were cousins. Gladys knew Eliud and Jose Antonio as co-workers of Omar's.
At the time, their reputation was that they were MS-13 gang members from El Salvador.
Detectives head to Vaughn's to talk with Jose Antonio and Eliud's co-workers.
Employees did tell me that Omar was the supervisor for the Salvadorians, and it appeared that they didn't like Omar, they didn't like taking orders from him.
Investigators learn that Omar had been promoted to a management position a few months before his murder, and that there was constant friction between him and Eliud.
Eliud and Omar did not get along. In fact, there had actually been an incident between the two of them where Eliud had been sent home for not doing his job properly.
Eliud became so upset that he contacted the union and made a formal complaint against Omar.
Did Eliud take matters into his own hands with deadly consequences? There's one more detail about him that raises suspicions.
Eliud drove a red sedan, and it seemed to be a possible match to the car that was on the surveillance video. However, when we looked closer at the red sedan and Eliud's red sedan, it was clear immediately that they did not match, and that was not Eliud's car in that surveillance video.
With Eliud looking less likely as the killer, investigators turn their focus to his cousin, Jose Antonio.
He claimed to have some association to some gangs. We subsequently served a search warrant at his residence. We did find assault weapons, although they ended up being imitation airsoft-type weapons, so obviously they weren't involved in the actual murder itself.
We didn't find any definitive ties to Salvadorian gangs. I think it was just their bravado, and they had a heavy reputation, and they knew people were afraid of them.
Without anything concrete linking Jose Antonio or Eliud to Omar's death, detectives are forced to move on.
That was just super frustrating. It just seemed like at every corner there was something that we thought was going to really point us in the right direction and really break the case open for us, and it just was another dead end.
Just as the case threatens to hit a wall, investigators scouring Omar's cell phone activity make a jaw-dropping discovery.
In combing through thousands and thousands of text messages, we did find many text messages where he and Rosalinda spoke to each other, and it became very clear that the rumors of the affair were definitely true. It also became apparent that not only was there an affair with Rosalinda, but that Gladys knew about the affair.
That was a cause for concern because initially the affair was denied by all parties at first when the investigation began.
The texts force investigators to rethink everything. Why did Gladys and Rosalinda lie? Were either of them trying to cover up for a crime? And had Saul learned the truth and done the unthinkable?
There was a lot of evidence that showed that there were emotional ties involved in that somebody could be angry enough to kill someone based off of that infidelity.
2. Omar Hernandez was brutally gunned down. Detectives have just obtained proof a rumored affair between Omar and coworker Rosalinda did actually take place.
Omar was involved romantically with Rosalinda, and through cell phone forensics, we located text messages that definitely confirmed that Omar had a conversation with Gladys as well about the affair that confirmed that she knew about it.
Gladys had previously told police there was nothing to the rumored affair, so investigators had to speak to her again.
When we asked Gladys about the affair, she broke down crying, and she confirmed the rumors to be true.
Gladys described how she found out about the affair with Rosalinda back in 2014. She returned home early from a trip to Mexico, and when she came back to their house, Omar wasn't there, but there was burnt wax and rose petals on the bed, on the floor around it, and she knew they weren't for her. So a couple days after, she ended up going through her husband's phone and found the text messages between Omar and Rosalinda, which confirmed to her that he had had an affair.
Detectives asked Gladys why she lied to them before. What was she trying to hide?
Her reasoning behind lying about the affair was simply to protect Omar's reputation. He had a good reputation, and she wanted to maintain that. And also, according to Gladys, they were working through their problems to keep their family together.
She just didn't want to have anything negative to say about her husband. He'd been brutally murdered. She kind of wanted to leave it at that. Let's investigate and try to figure out the person responsible.
Police are also curious why Rosalinda had been untruthful and bring her into the station.
And told her we knew that she did have an affair with Omar. She told us that she lied because she was embarrassed about it, but also that she didn't want to inflame things with Saul.
We asked her whether he knew about the affair or not. She confirmed that he did know about it. She was definitely concerned about her husband.
I asked her flat out if she believed that Saul may have killed Omar, and her answer to my question was, I don't believe he pulled the trigger. So of course that was alarming. I thought maybe I missed something at the beginning, and that there was a potential that Saul may have actually even hired someone to kill Omar. It presents difficulty because then you have to backtrack and look at the initial suspect once again and make sure you haven't overlooked anything.
Investigators re-look at Saul, but after combing through phone records and texts, find no evidence he hired anyone to kill Omar, or that he committed the crime himself.
At this point, the evidence did not bear fruit that Saul was the suspect we were looking for. His alibi checked out. There was nothing else that ever came up that pointed him as being the one who did this.
Saul is cleared once again. With yet another busted lead and no arrest in sight, police have to contend with the fear that's gripping Mammoth Lakes.
It was pretty hard for the community to have all these investigations going on and talk of murder and gossip of violence and the things that led to it, but no answers, just dead ends. I think people genuinely were fearing for their lives because the killer was still out there.
Afectó a la comunidad porque todos vivían en pánico, porque todos le preguntaban por qué pasó esto, por qué en un pueblo tan chico, donde nunca había pasado nada así. No había explicación y pienso que la gente sí tuvo miedo.
Despite months of tireless work, investigators run out of leads.
The case essentially went cold. There was nothing to indicate any one person was responsible.
At this point, we're well over a year into the investigation, and the question starts to creep in of, is this one that may never be solved? It starts to weigh on you because we've formed relationships with Gladys, and we want nothing more than to bring justice for her. family.
It definitely wears on you as an investigator. You constantly ask yourself, what did I miss? There's got to be something there that I missed.
Fue uno de los puntos más difíciles para mí también. Pero siempre tuve fe de que algún día, dije, así pasen años, se va a solucionar porque no puede quedar la muerte de Omar impune. De esa manera como él murió, no puede quedar así.
We had always been feeling that if we could just get that one piece of information that could lead us to the suspect, we'll develop the rest. But we needed somebody to come forward and give us a break that we needed to solve that case.
2.5 years later, detectives received just that. An explosive phone call that upends the whole case.
In June 2019, a person called and said that they know who killed Omar and has some concerns for their own safety.
In my mind, I felt that that's the big break that we needed. Sometimes that's all it is. One person with information. I knew right.
Information that blows the case wide open.
A man by the name of Francisco Ramirez came into our office, and you could tell that something was scaring him. He said that he was in fear for his life, for what he was going to tell us. Francisco started telling us about this individual. His name was Josue Correas Vasquez, and he was a co-worker at Vaughn's. They both worked the night shift.
Francisco worked with Josue, and Josue was actually the brother to Eliud. And he describes this contentious relationship between Omar and Eliud and Josue. Months before the murder, says that they were constantly butting heads with one another, described Eliud and Josue as constantly disrespecting Omar. Omar would delegate tasks that need to be completed, and Eliud and Josue would always be disrespectful and say, why do we got to do that? Nah, I don't think so. Was just constantly kind of challenging him.
Josue had actually told Francisco that he hated Omar because he had been disrespected and that he had threatened to fire his whole family, and that he had to take matters into his own hands. Then, just several hours after the murder had occurred, Francisco told us that he received a text message from Josue, and it said something to the effect of, "See, I'm not playing around." And then there was another text message that said, "Nobody messes with me."
When he saw the text message, he felt very strongly that that is Josue's way of telling him he just murdered Omar.
Francisco then divulges another disturbing piece of information.
Francisco told us that he had actually gone shooting with Josue months prior to the murder. They had gone out in the middle of the forest, and that Josue had brought an AK-47 with him and were just shooting targets. When Francisco mentioned AK-47, obviously all of our ears perked up, as that's the weapon we were looking for.
And then several years after Omar was murdered, Francisco became the manager to take Omar's place at Vaughn's. And he's now in a position to where he needs to delegate, and he's now seeing the same disrespectful tone from Josue. At some point in time, he and Josue got into an argument, and Josue says something to the effect of, "Don't make me do to you what I did to Omar."
We asked Francisco why he is now just coming forward 2.5 years after the murder. And Francisco said that he was scared of Josue.
He was concerned for his safety, and he wanted to tell law enforcement about what he knew because he said, if something is to happen to me, I want you guys to know who's responsible.
Francisco realized I could be the one that's next, and this guy needs to be stopped.
Detectives contact Gladys to gather more information about the working relationship between Omar and Josue.
Gladys did tell us that when Josue first came to the States, he didn't have a lot of friends, he didn't know very many people, and Omar had taken Josue under his wing.
Omar was kind to him, would bring him food for lunch breaks, really seemed to keep an eye on Josue and care about his well-being.
Siempre le ponía su lunch para que él comiera en Vaughn's y siempre me decía, oye Gladys, échale más lunch para convivir, para darle a Josue.
Omar and Josue seemed to get along for many months during that time period. But Gladys told us that once Omar was promoted to supervisor, things started to change between Omar and Josue.
Cuando a Omar le dan el puesto, sí sentía que algo había cambiado. La misma relación de amistad ya no era igual.
Omar had a job to do, and as Omar started giving more direction and instructions to Josue, Josue started to be a bit more belligerent towards him, talking back, refusing to do certain things.
There had been reported conflicts between the two, and that Josue had felt like Omar was on a power trip.
They didn't get along at work. They were constantly arguing with one another.
Could a workplace conflict have turned into murder? Investigators pull the employee timesheets for the night Omar was killed.
We went back through the Vaughn's records from that night to see when people clocked in, and we noticed that Josue did not work at all that night. We also looked into what vehicle does Josue drive.
Detectives are hopeful that Josue's car will be a match to one of the two vehicles spotted in the surveillance footage.
We determined that at the time of the murder in 2016, he did in fact own a 2012 silver Toyota Camry. That vehicle, shortly after the murder, had been resold to another individual. So we ended up finding that vehicle down in another part of California, and it was the same vehicle that we'd seen in the video surveillance.
It matched the color, the make, and model of what we were looking for.
At that moment, we felt that we had the person responsible for the murder of Omar.
Needing hard evidence to tie Josue to the murder, detectives head to the area where Francisco had witnessed him firing an AK-47.
It wasn't a designated shooting range. It was a dirt road off of a main highway.
We went out to the range where he said that he shot with Josue, and we were actually able to recover 56 cartridges that were just below the dirt. All of these cartridges were extremely important because as we grabbed the first cartridge we saw, it had the same head stamp of the cartridges found at the murder scene. When we found shell casings, it just really hit you in the gut.
We thought, wow, this is...
Let's hope they finally got a break after discovering spent bullet casings that appear to match those recovered from the crime scene.
We found north of 50 expended projectiles in the dirt and sent those casings back to the laboratory for comparison.
After we compared the two casings together, one from the murder scene and one from the shooting range, the lab told us that they were fired from the same gun.
This is huge in an investigation. We have an identified suspect and we have physical evidence.
On January 30th, 2020, Josue Correa Vazquez is arrested for Omar's murder.
After Josue was arrested, we brought him in for an interview. We knew that the shell casings recovered at the crime scene were the same as the shooting range. What we didn't have was a way to tie that in to Josue. So what we decided to do was create a fake DNA profile that would be shown to Josue, and what it said was that we recovered DNA from the shell casings and that it matched somebody of the same age and ethnicity as Josue. The goal of having the DNA profile was in hopes that it would push Josue to tell the truth.
Detectives also use another tactic and make an emotional appeal.
Investigator Callahan actually had a photograph of Omar's children on his desk.
I showed him the kids and I said, these kids, they don't deserve what happened to them. Let's try to give them some closure.
They have no father. They just want answers. They want to know.
Josue stuns investigators with what he says next.
Y no hay que importar para los niños, ese día como cuando ya el odio ya lo invade, ya siente este día lo voy a hacer.
There was a lot of hate against the bar for my part, and that's why me alone decided to kill him.
It was a monumental moment that we felt, okay, we've got the right guy.
The question remains, why would Josue commit such a heinous crime?
Josue told us he hated Omar. He hated that he would tell him how to do his job. He hated that he'd be tough on him.
He felt that he was disrespected by Omar, and he was there to teach Omar a lesson.
Josue proceeds to tell investigators what happened that fatal night.
You knew that Omar was going to work at 2 in the morning?
He said that he drove by Omar's residence a number of times, confirmed that the vehicle in the video surveillance was in fact his vehicle.
He says he went around the block to see if he was home.
Just before 2 a.m., Josue parked across the street from Omar's home, and he waited for him to come out.
He saw Omar come out of his residence, and that was the moment that he'd been waiting for. He grabbed the AK-47. When Omar went to the driver's side of the door to leave, Josue emerged from the trees and yelled at him, "You don't look so invincible now, do you?" And described shooting him several times.
Eso fue lo que le dijo, que no era invencible. Que no era invencible.
He described the look in Omar's face, the surprise, the shock.
How many times did you shoot?
Era mucho el odio. Le disparé todo el cartucho. Como el tercer disparo ya cayó.
He said he kept firing.
Josue said that after he murdered Omar, he went home, he went to bed. A lot of Josue's interview is matter of fact, which was chilling in and of itself, that you can have murdered somebody and just be talking about it in such an unemotional way.
Josue admits that several days after killing Omar, he told his brother Eliud what he had done.
Eliud was concerned about the murder weapon and whether it could be traced back to Josue. So Eliud took it upon himself to take the AK-47 to the forest and bury it so no one would ever be able to find it.
Based on Josue's confession, police bring in Eliud.
He eventually admitted to us that he did help dispose of the gun and gave us the details about where it was, and he pointed to the exact location where the firearm would be recovered.
So we dug right there and sure enough found an AK-47.
At this point, it's kind of a prosecutor's dream. We have a confession statement from the defendant, and the murder weapon that we never thought we would recover just showed up.
For his part in the crime, Eliud is sentenced to a year in jail.
Eliud was charged as being an accessory after the fact. He was charged for helping dispose of the murder weapon and not telling authorities about it.
On January 18th, 2022, Josue is sentenced to 2 life terms in prison for the murder of Omar Hernandez.
El día de la sentencia, sentí paz porque se estaba haciendo justicia de la muerte de Omar. Nunca imaginé que Josue hubiera hecho eso. Tan desgarrador, algo tan triste.
The biggest surprise was that it was somebody that you just never really would have expected. Omar had taken Josue under his wing. By all accounts, Omar cared very much about Josue.
That's what was so troubling in this case. Omar lost his life, was brutally murdered for no reason other than he was a hard-working individual who had expectations.
A mis hijos les quitó un padre y a mí la mitad de mi corazón. Eso nos arrancó Josue.
Omar's family still feels the deep impact.
The smoke is so thick and so black. The heat is intense.
There were old people screaming out in the dark, "Help me, help me."
It was a terrible scene of mayhem.
It was just something stupid. Something that I wish I'd never done.
How could a person with his experience commit such a terrible offense?
Satan saying to me, it's the right thing to do. I was reading radio news the morning that this happened, and around 5 a.m. we got an alert in the newsroom that there was a fire at Quakers Hill. My name is Jamelle Wells. I'm a senior court reporter. For more than 2 decades, I've covered some of Australia's highest profile court cases. Within about 2 hours, it was established it was a nursing home. There were people trapped inside. There were perhaps some people who had perished. It was horrific. It was so horrible to think of old people burning alive in their beds. I assumed it was an accidental fire. I think everybody did, because it was too horrible a thing to imagine someone having deliberately lit a fire in a nursing home.
The Quakers Hill Nursing Home is an aged care facility in the western suburbs of Sydney. Mark Tedeschi is Senior Crown Prosecutor for New South Wales. It was owned by a large company that had a number of nursing homes. It was an H-shaped building with 4 wards. We know that there were about 100 high dependency patients that were living there. They were people who were largely immobile and required constant care for their every need.
These were people who needed help showering and dressing and eating and toileting, and a lot of them couldn't get in and out of bed on their own. They needed help even to do that.
Most of the residents were elderly. Some of them had dementia. Some of them had debilitating type illnesses or things that made them disabled. I'm Rod Demery, retired homicide detective. The residents of Quaker Hill were what is described as the greatest generation, the World War II era, where people worked extremely hard, and they were getting into that last chapter of life.
For example, there was Dorothy Sterling, who was born in 1931. She was an amazing seamstress. She would often make wedding dresses. I'm Dr. Joni Johnston, clinical and forensic psychologist and private investigator. She ended up having a huge family, including 13 great-grandchildren. She even had a great-great-grandchild, and she was really known as the matriarch of this huge family. Another, really interesting patient was Cesar Galea. He was 82 years old. He had originally been born in Egypt, where he was an expert leather maker. And then when he immigrated to Australia, he joined the police force and served there for about 20 years. And he also had just this legacy of a hard worker and somebody that his family really loved and revered him.
They were in a nursing home because their families could no longer look after them. So that was a heartbreaking decision for families to make. It was a last resort, if you like, because they needed people to lift them in and out of bed, to physically do things for them that their families could just no longer cope with.
I don't know that I've ever talked to a family who placed a family member in a nursing facility who did not feel a tremendous amount of ambivalence and guilt about it. Even if they knew it was the right thing, they know that they are leaving their loved one in the care of people that they assume and hope are caring and loving and good nurses and good providers.
They were very heavy-duty, hardcore drugs mostly given for pain relief, for old people who had chronic pain after surgeries, pain from cancer. Drugs such as Endone, which you must have a prescription for. It's known on the black market as hillbilly heroin. It's such a strong medication. The way those drugs are dispensed in a hospital or a nursing home is always with more than one staff member present. It's a very strict protocol. Also, there is an audit done every day of that drug cupboard. They did that audit and they noticed very quickly that more than 200 Endone tablets were missing.
I mean, this is not a minor shortage. This is a huge amount of drugs that has gone missing.
They noticed that the drug cupboard hadn't been forced, so someone must have accessed it with a key. It looked very odd. It looked very suspicious. They immediately notified a manager.
She redid the audit and realised that there was this large number of Endones who were missing, and she called the police.
They get there and they begin their initial investigation. And then at that moment, they get another call.
After they'd been there only for about 15 minutes, they were called away to an urgent domestic violence offence that had occurred. The smoke from that fire caused the smoke detectors to be activated. The fire doors between each of the 4 wards closed, the alarm was sounded, and the message was received by the fire brigade. Very shortly after that, the fire brigade arrived. They went straight to room 19 and put out the fire. They didn't realise that there were 2 fires. It was not for about 15 minutes before they realised that there was a second fire. By that stage, the fire had really already taken hold of that room, and it was already breaching the ceiling and going into the roof space.
The smoke is so thick and so black. The heat is intense. That is a chaotic and a very frightening scene.
It is complete chaos. Firefighters, nursing home staff, they're all trying to escort their patients out as quickly as they can. But the smoke is so horrible, just like a war zone.
By that stage, it had taken hold of the wing. Residents, confined to their beds and couldn't help themselves, were screaming for help. It was a terrible scene of mayhem.
There were people screaming out in the dark, help me, hoping that someone would come in and rescue them.
Just the terror these nursing home patients must have felt. Imagine being in a bed, knowing you can't physically move yourself, and not knowing if anybody's going to come save you.
The firefighters described this scene as horrific. They said it was one of the most awful things they'd ever come across because of the frailty and the vulnerability of the people who were, some of them, burning alive in their beds. They could hear them, they just couldn't get to them. And some of the images are things that just will stick with them forever.
Three people died at the scene, residents, elderly residents, and 8 of them later died in hospital from their injuries, either from burns or from smoke inhalation. It was a terrible situation.
It's inconceivable what the families went through when they found out how their loved one had died, first of all, and then ultimately what caused the fire.
No one wanted to think that it was a deliberately lit fire that had caused all of this. It was very obvious to them that something was wrong here. Accidental fires don't operate that way. Fires that are in a building in 2 different areas are usually deliberately lit, so they straight away became suspicious.
It didn't take the police long at all to see Roger Dean as their prime suspect. He'd only been working at the Quakers Hill nursing home for about 2 months.
His main responsibility would have been to supervise more junior nurses, and crucially, he was in charge of the medical care overnight of all the residents. He was in charge of overseeing the welfare of these residents, of deciding whether or not they needed to see a doctor, making sure they were medicated properly. It was a very responsible position. It was a position of great trust from both the families of the residents themselves, and the managers of the nursing home.
He was the person who was in charge of the hospital the night of the fire.
So Roger Dean was born in 1976, and he immigrated with his mom and 3 siblings from Vietnam, where he was born, to Australia when he was still a baby. They came in as refugees. His dad died trying to immigrate later on. And so it was a struggle, I think, for his family.
He realised during his teen years that he was homosexual, and that caused conflict with his mother.
This was a source of, I think, confusion and unhappiness from his family. They just didn't really understand what that meant for him, and it really caused some rift in the family. He did well in school, even though he was teased and bullied a lot at school for his sexual orientation.
He went on, nevertheless, to study nursing at the University of Sydney, where he got his degree.
It certainly seems like Roger started out as a good nurse. He was very well trained, he was smart.
He was reprimanded by a more senior staff member for not taking proper notes about a patient, and he accused that staff member of bullying him, and that staff member soon after had nails put in her car tyres twice and paint thrown all over her car. Another work colleague found traces of white paint on Roger Dean's desk, so management put two and two together and they ordered an investigation into his behaviour.
And so what does Roger do? He quits. That's his solution. He resigns.
The fact that Roger will resolve his issue with his supervisor by creating some sort of property damage, throwing paint on a car, shows that he is a very, very different and dangerous man. He has no impulse control, and it seems that whatever anger or whatever emotion he has to satisfy.
He is found essentially under the influence of drugs. He is mumbling, he's got a white line around his mouth, he's not very coherent, and staff is alerted. He's immediately suspended and sent home. He says he had bipolar disorder and that his treating physician had changed his medication, and the reason that he was acting so bizarrely was because of his medication. What they said was, we are going to move you to the day shift. And of course, what is the message? We are going to closely supervise you now because we don't really trust you. And so once Roger Dean found this out, he resigned.
Because Roger had these issues or these problems, just simply left them off his resume or CV. When someone looks good on paper and there's a time period that's not accounted for, that should be an immediate red flag. But for whatever reason, none of the references or the previous employment was checked. When employers or facilities are in need of people, there are things that have to be met that are required. You have to have a nurse that has current registration and current license, and Roger had that. He was qualified and licensed to work in the facility.
When Roger Dean turned up and offered to work probably the least favoured shift, the night shift, they were happy to take him on board. He solved some problems for them.
At the same time, he was doing the very end part of a law degree at Sydney University. So he had a lot on his plate. He was both working and studying at the same time.
Roger Dean showed up for work at about 10 p.m. that night. He was told that drugs had gone missing, but crucially, he was allowed to continue with his shift.
Around midnight, 2 police officers came to the front door wanting to get into the nursing home to speak to the facility manager. Roger Dean was the one who went to the front door and let them in.
Around 4 a.m. or so, Roger Dean told 2 junior nurses to take a break. They refused. They said, we've already had our break. So he then got another 2 junior nurses to take their break. He said, you deserve a break, go and have one now. Just before 5 a.m, alarms started going off. And then he started helping staff evacuate residents from one wing of the nursing home.
He was helping the fire brigade officers take residents out of the facility. To all appearances, doing what any responsible senior nurse would do in a situation where there's a fire in an aged care facility.
He portrayed himself as a hero of the day. He introduced himself. He said, "Hi, my name's Roger. I'm one of the nurses here, and there was a big fire, and luckily we've gotten a lot of people out."
He was taken to the police station, and at the police station he confessed that he was responsible for lighting the fire.
The police investigation into this matter unfolded the same day. It was very, very quick. Two day shift nurses discovered that over 200 endone tablets were missing.
They wrote up an audit sheet, and they found some of the blister packs, the empty blister packs, and they handed these over to the facility manager whom they called to come to the nursing home immediately.
So this manager went through the CCTV footage.
The nursing home had 3 CCTV cameras situated inside the facility.
And she saw on that Roger Dean going in and out of the drug room dozens of times.
There was a camera outside the treatment room, and Roger Dean was coming in and going out and coming in and going out.
The fact that there was a frequent going in and out of the room 36 times, that's very odd and it's very strange.
So one of the things that really strikes me about this video is just how often he is going in and out of this room, and how he tends to be kind of looking around a little bit to see if anybody is watching him. And so there's kind of a surreptitious part of it.
Roger Dean was in that treatment room for more than 2 hours. I mean, that of itself raised some suspicions. The facility manager then put the audit, the blister packs, and some other documentation into the manager's office for safekeeping and left the nursing home, intending to contact the police first in the morning.
The evidence is starting to shape up and show that Roger is probably the likely person involved in this. I know no one really wants to say that Roger's done this, but all of them start to suspect that he's done it. But so I think the walls started to close in on him.
It started just as a small flame, and I thought that's okay. Like, that's containable.
What strikes me about this is how innocent and kind of childlike he is in his interactions with police.
He gave a very full account over about 2 hours of what he had done in lighting the fires.
I didn't expect it to be so big. It was just something stupid and something that I wish I'd never done.
I think initially the families of the deceased 11 residents from the nursing home and those who had been severely injured in the fire was one of disbelief. How could a person with his experience and his knowledge and his level of responsibility commit such a terrible offence? Roger Dean had a very serious issue of drug dependency. He was actively stealing drugs from the nursing home, particularly endone, but also a whole lot of other drugs. So Roger Dean knew that all of the evidence of his theft of these drugs was in the manager's room. He also must have realised that if he was found out for having taken these drugs, it would not only be the end of his nursing career, but it would be the end of his future legal career. And he was that close to finishing doing law at university, and he had an ambition to switch and become a lawyer. So there were high stakes for Roger Dean. Having realised that early the next morning the police would come back and be given all this material relating to the theft of drugs and that inevitably he would be found out, he decided to do something about it.
At that point, I think he panics. And I think all he can think about is, how can I cover my tracks? How can I get out of this? What can I do to salvage the situation? And I think at that point, he starts coming up with a scheme in his mind to divert attention away from this theft onto something else.
What he did is he went into room 19, which was in A2 wing, which was unoccupied, and lit a fire on a bed. He then left A2 wing and walked to A1 wing, and he went into room 3, where there were 2 residents in that room. There were 4 beds and 2 residents, and both those residents, known to him, were immobile residents who were unable to leave their beds. And he lit a fire in that room on one of the vacant beds. So what he did was he lit 2 fires, and in between those 2 fires was the manager's room where the evidence of his theft of the drugs was located.
I think he was such a narcissist, he thought he could get away with the cover-up, and he didn't think the fires would spread. There was a lot of confusion. Staff were trying to account for everybody. Sometime later, some of the staff were then trying to go back in. Firefighters and police were trying to keep them outside.
Roger Dean spoke to 3 fire brigade officers asking to be allowed to go back into the building to the treatment room to retrieve the drug register. He impressed upon them how important it was that this drug register not be destroyed. The first 2 that he spoke to refused to allow him entry to the building, but the third one said, "We'll come with you and you can retrieve the drug register." So he eventually went into the treatment room, opened up the drug cabinet and got the drug register. In fact, I think he got 2 registers and put them both into a carry bag that he was carrying. He then walked out of the building saying that he had to go home to get Ventolin because he was suffering from asthma. He
left the scene with the drug registers in his bag. He then went, tore them up, destroyed them, threw them in a garbage bin outside a shop, and then he went back to the nursing home.
When police search Roger Dean's home, they are just astounded by the number and extent of his kind of drug collection.
There was something like 40 different types of drugs that were found in and around his home and his car, and 65 prescriptions from different doctors that he'd shopped around to get drugs. He was collecting hordes of tablets to meet his needs as a drug-dependent person.
They found dozens of different medications in huge quantities. Some of them were some of the endone tablets that were stolen from the Quakers Hill nursing home, but these other drugs were from chemists and pharmacies all over the place, and they were in containers marked Rogers prescription medication. They were bewildered by the quantity of drugs, the amounts that he had hoarded. They estimated that he was taking something like 15 different tablets a day. They included endones, they included sleeping pills, they included a range of other medication.
There was no doubt that he was drug addicted to a vast array of different drugs.
He answered their questions quite clearly and quite succinctly, and he stated very matter-of-factly that he thought Satan had told him to light the fires.
I just feel evil, that I'm just corrupted with evil thoughts that had made me do that. Satan saying to me that it's the right thing to do.
Typically when someone has committed a crime and they have confessed to the crime, they want to sort of not have responsibility for the things that they've done. I guess that's an easier pill to swallow than admit to yourself that you're a terrible person.
It's another way of diffusing responsibility. It's not me, it's the drugs. It's not me, it's the bipolar disorder. It's not me, it's the devil. It's not me, it's something or somebody else.
He told police that he had depression. He said he felt like taking his own life. He was on a lot of medication, and he said that Satan had told him to do it, that he had evil thoughts, and that's why he'd lit the fires.
I just feel evil, that I'm just corrupted with evil thoughts, like Satan saying to me that it's the right thing to do.
There's absolutely no indication that Roger Dean was delusional or heard the voice of the devil talking to him or was psychotic or any of that. And yet, isn't it better to tell yourself that the devil made you do something than that you chose to do it and that you were willing to let other people die and watch them die because you didn't want to get in trouble for stealing medication?
Crown relied upon a category of murder which is called reckless indifference to human life murder. So the Crown accepted that he had no specific intention to kill or do serious harm, but rather that he was recklessly indifferent to the lives of the residents at the aged care facility. I think he felt that a jury composed of ordinary citizens would have very little sympathy for a senior experienced nurse who lights 2 fires in an aged care facility where there are immobile patients.
It would just be a lot tougher in front of a jury to get any sympathy whatsoever for Roger Dean.
The day that his trial was due to start, Roger Dean changed his plea from not guilty to guilty. It was such a dramatic moment in the courtroom. Everybody had been bracing for a very long-winded jury trial that could have gone on for months, and on the day he just changed his pleas, guilty, 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 guilty. As each guilty plea was entered, you could hear sighs of relief by people in the courtroom, or someone starting to cry, or someone comforting someone else in the courtroom. It was quite dramatic. The next question for us was, what sort of sentence will he be given for 11 counts of murder? Her family members told the court during Roger Dean's sentencing hearing that she was a very happy person. She danced down the corridors of the nursing home, and they said when she died, they couldn't understand why someone like Roger Dean, who they trusted implicitly to care for her, would want to kill such a defenceless and vulnerable lady. It's just something that will never leave them. At one point, when one family member was talking about how she sang lullabies to her mother while her mother was dying in hospital, that's the first time I saw any emotion from Roger Dean. He started to cry in the dock of the courtroom. He just put his head down and tears came on his cheeks, and I wondered whether that was for them or whether that was for his fear of what it would be like living in jail for the rest of his life, feeling sorry for himself.
As a result of Roger's actions and his guilty plea, he was sentenced to prison for life without parole.
The sentencing judge, she found that the offence was so horrific and so serious, and the number of deaths was so high, and his breach of trust was so great, that it was within the worst category of offences, even though he didn't have a specific intent to kill. It was because it was in the worst category that she sentenced him to 11 life sentences. And in New South Wales, life means life.
When Roger Dean was jailed for life, some family members were punching the air and shouting and jumping. They was just jumping off the ground. They were so overjoyed and happy with the life sentences that he was given. The judge who jailed Roger Dean said that these people put their loved ones in the nursing home as a last resort. It's because they could no longer look after them anymore, and there's a great amount of guilt associated with that. They then had to endure the double whammy of knowing that the people that they'd put into a nursing home were either burnt alive or died from the injuries they received during these fires. It was an ultimate breach of trust on all levels. Roger Dean was described by the judge who sentenced him as a narcissist, and by definition a narcissist is someone who is over-obsessed with their own importance, someone who can't see beyond themselves. And I think in his case he was worried about being caught out for stealing drugs. He thought he would lose his job, he knew he could face criminal charges, and he just did whatever it took to try to cover up his crime. He just lit the fires with reckless regard to human life or human suffering. He was just thinking of Roger Dean.
It started just as a small flame. I thought that that's okay. Like, that's containable.
His intention was to protect himself, to protect his future career.
I didn't expect it to be so big.
He put his interests ahead of the welfare and lives of his patients.
It was just something stupid and something that I wish I'd never done.
What keeps coming back to me is the fact that he carried it so far and that he so deliberately put people in danger. These are people who he knows, and these were people who are vulnerable under his care.
I just feel evil, corrupted with evil thoughts that had made me do that.
I don't think Roger had any remorse at all.
Satan saying to me that it's the right thing to do.
I think he wanted to cover his tracks. I think he wanted to just get away with it. And I think he wanted to try to make himself look like a hero at one point. But it didn't quite work out for him.
The nursing home has been rebuilt, and the company that owned the nursing home has now changed its name. I think Roger Dean's murders, the 11 murders that he's serving jail time for, are 11 of the worst murders in Australia. This was a mass murder, and it was truly horrible. The Prime Minister at the time, Julia Gillard, said it was horrific. She gave her condolences to the families of those who died. She said she'd never come across anything like it, and she wanted to try to do whatever she could to ensure that nothing like this ever happened again.
Police are called to the scene of 38-year-old Kerry Woolley's murder. Suspect number 1, her boyfriend.
What was the last time I saw her? 1 o'clock I left hers this morning.
Here.
Yeah, we was having a few drinks.
The boyfriend, Ian Bennett, soon ends up in the back of a police car.
What I'm about to say to you is quite important. You can be under arrest for murder at this time, okay? You didn't have murder. It's a suspicion at the moment, okay?
Bennett vehemently protests his innocence. What part will lip-reading Bennett's mother, caught on camera, play in the detective's pursuit of a killer?
The prosecution case was that Mum was lip-syncing to Ian Bennett, dash count.
She didn't want to admit there was a problem. I suppose it crosses your mind, did he do it?
Detectives gather evidence until a picture of a suspect emerges. Which piece of the puzzle will prove murder? What will be a killer's mistake?
My name is Narita Barra KC. I'm a criminal barrister based in London. The morning of Sunday the 12th, Ian Bennett went over to Kerry's flat and went into her flat and then phoned the police and the ambulance.
Ian Bennett is the boyfriend of Kerry Woolley, a mother of 2.
He made a 999 call, which was along these lines: I have walked into my girlfriend's flat. I don't understand what's happened. It's a terrible scene. She's clearly been hurt and injured, and I don't know what to do. What should I be doing? And he was having a panic attack, an anxiety attack on the phone.
Please, ambulance.
The police and the ambulance, when they arrived at the ground floor flat, found a very bloodied scene. Kerry Woolley was on the floor in a state of undress. She had substantial wounds all over her body, and the flat effectively looked as though somebody had come into it without permission.
As the police lock down the crime scene inside Kerry Woolley's flat, outside, body cameras capture the real-life drama which is unfolding.
Sorry, sir. When was the last time you saw her? 1 o'clock, I left hers this morning. Here? Yeah, we was having a few drinks. I left here at 1. Mum and Dad had a big argument at home, so I went home last night to make sure everything was all right there. Right. And then I've been trying to ring them and text her all day, no answers. So I just thought I'd knock on and the door wasn't open, I had to pull the handle. Yeah. And then I walked into that.
There were calls made by Ian Bennett to other family members to alert them that Kerry has been killed and to explain that he has come across the scene. So within a very short period of time, most of the family members are now aware of what's happened.
Ian Bennett displays all the emotions of a traumatised, bereft boyfriend.
You can see that he's trying to display the emotion that he thinks the partner or friend of someone who's just been murdered would show.
Investigators soon learn that Ian and Kerry haven't been together for very long.
Kerry actually only knows Bennett for a matter of weeks, 5 or 6 weeks. Their actual friendship and their connection doesn't have a great deal of time to progress. Bennett is really embedding himself into Kerry's life. He's positioning himself as this crutch for Kerry.
Police investigating Kerry's death begin delving into her backstory. They learn that before she met new boyfriend Ian Bennett, there's been turbulence in her life. Hers, though, is a supportive family.
Kerry was a couple of years younger than me. As children, we were very close. My mum always used to dress us the same. We were best friends right throughout life. We were always together. We used to go to the park together. We used to play with our neighbours. Everything we did together. I became a teenager first, obviously, and I did my own thing. But as we met our first boyfriend, the 4 of us were inseparable. Holidays, nights out.
As a teenager, Kerry begins building a career at a life insurance company.
I first met Kerry when she was a bright-eyed, bubbly 15-year-old. She came to work at the same organisation that I did as a support clerk. So she was starting at the bottom of the ladder. Kerry was very competent.
She was just this bubbly girl that everyone wanted to talk to. She was very popular as she got older.
Everybody knew Kerry for a smile. She was just a beautiful, beautiful young lady, inside and out.
Kerry turns heads wherever she goes.
She was very elegant, she was beautiful. She never went anywhere without her hair or makeup done.
I remember meeting Kerry and her sister Lisa very clearly. One Friday afternoon, these 2 beautiful businesswomen walked in, long blonde hair, and the pub just stopped and looked at them. There wasn't a man around who didn't look at Kerry or admire her from a distance. And if you ever got speaking to her, how bubbly she was.
Steve Mallon becomes ever closer to Kerry's sister, Lisa.
After some years, me and Lisa became best friends. Blossomed into something else, egged on by Kerry.
As love blooms for Lisa and Steve, Kerry also meets a man that she falls for. And soon, big news, she's expecting.
From the moment that she got pregnant, she blossomed. Yeah, she went from being the young Kerry that we knew to being very much a young lady. She just came into her own.
It's not long before Kerry has a second child. She appears set for life.
She had 2 beautiful children. She had a lovely home. She drove around in nice cars. She had everything. Her family meant everything to her. To everyone on the outside, she had the perfect life. She had everything.
In her job, too, Kerry excels.
She worked her way up through claims handling roles, became a support coordinator, and at that point in time, Kerry and I worked alongside each other. And then Kerry became a claims team manager. She worked on numerous different teams within the department, whether it was motor, real estate, construction engineering.
She got promoted quite quickly.
It is now on Kerry's timeline that life becomes less perfect. Detectives uncover the seeds of what makes her vulnerable to Ian Bennett.
On a Friday, quite often we would head to the pub have a quick lunchtime drink. That was something that quite a lot of people in the office in the early days used to do.
Friends and family tell detectives about when Kerry's drinking becomes a serious problem.
We noticed that she was probably drinking a bit more than what she normally does.
All of a sudden, trips to the pub seemed to be becoming more of a frequent thing with Kerry again, and not just on a Friday. And I remember one day we'd gone to the pub. It was a lovely summer afternoon, just to have a quick drink. And bless her, she was rather thirsty, so her first drink had been downed a little quicker than perhaps I'd remembered them to be. And then she was going to have another, and it was like, you have to drive home to pick the children up. Do you think that's a wise thing to do?
Police see a lifestyle which leaves Kerry at risk. Those around her put themselves on high alert.
Partner confided in us a bit more how he was struggling with Kerry, and then there was an instance where he said, well, I've had to take the car keys off her, and that was shocking.
Her relationship with her partner wasn't going perhaps as well as it had been. There were times when obviously she would come into work, or we'd have conversations, and things perhaps weren't as rosy as they had previously been. But then one day she just seemed to be losing a lot of weight. Her vibrancy was not what it had been.
Evidence of frailty emerges as Kerry's drinking ultimately contributes to a separation from the father of her two children.
When Kerry's long-term relationship with the father of her children breaks down, she loses custody of her children, and that's because of her escalating issue with alcohol abuse, and so it's deemed safer for the children to have predominant custody with their father, and Kerry is given visiting access rights.
It was late 2017, and she moved out of the family home into a nearby apartment, just round the corner really.
Kerry's family rally around her to help. They sense her need for protection.
They move her into a flat nearby them so that they can keep an eye on her.
She wasn't alone in her problems. Everyone was there a lot of the time. All the family had lots of different ways of keeping in contact, making sure she was safe.
She missed her children without a doubt. She was able to see them, yeah, it was supervised. We didn't let the children see her on their own, but we did let her see them.
When living alone, detectives discover that Kerry becomes increasingly exposed.
She was very vulnerable, weak, didn't eat for days sometimes, pass out, would hallucinate, we'd have to take her to hospital, ambulances many times.
We knew she was putting herself in danger.
At work, Kerry Woolley's issues with alcohol become hard to hide.
On one of the days, Kerry had fallen asleep at her desk. Obviously because she'd had a drink. And then again, she was sent home. It was hard. It was really hard to watch her. To know that you wanted to be there and to help her. But actually were unable.
In all aspects of her once successful life, investigators discover a downturn. She's made redundant.
All of these circumstances combined leave Kerry in a really vulnerable state because her life as she know it has entirely changed. She's worked in the same job for a long time, she's had the same relationship for a long time, and just over a short span of months, that's entirely turned on its head and she's feeling lost and she's feeling alone.
Absolutely no way I would have thought this would have happened to Kerry.
Around this time as well, the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic kicks in, and so on top of all of these issues that she's facing, suddenly the world's in this very unprecedented space. She becomes very isolated, she doesn't have access to her children, and everything escalates further out of control.
There was no focus for her. She got no reason to get up in the morning. She got no reason to be taking any care and pride.
Kerry's spiralling dependence on alcohol leaves her all but defenceless as she looks for company online. The pandemic means that friends and family are not around to see who's coming in and out of her life. Ian Bennett is not the only man to be considered by detectives as her killer.
She was speaking with friends, potentially speaking with strangers or people that she knew but didn't know if that makes sense. She could have been talking to anybody.
She's lost her job, she's lost her family, she's lost a lot of the connections around her, and she's very lonely. And because of that, it means that she's maybe less likely to discriminate the people who are coming in her life. Maybe she's vetting them less because she's just looking for human connection. And that means that people who are out there and want to abuse people can take advantage of that situation. They take advantage of that vulnerability because they know that she's not in a position to defend herself.
When she was in the flat, it just seemed as if the word was out. And she was a very vulnerable person. And just idiots would just turn up and she'd befriend idiots. People just taking advantage. And people were like asking, can I borrow money? Can I do this? Kerry Bean, what she said, oh yeah, just, don't give me back.
She did have money. So yeah, potentially they were trying to get something from her.
As Kerry seeks companionship, detectives uncover that it's the summer before she's killed when her choice of partner first puts her in danger.
Kerry enters into a new relationship, and
he wasn't a particularly pleasant person towards Kerry. There were times when I would see her or speak to her, and you could tell in her voice that it hadn't all been going well.
This one chap she was with, he was violent. There's a lot of police involvement because of that, and the family would intervene. We would try and get rid of him, but we couldn't.
This man turned out to be extremely abusive, extremely aggressive. He stole money from her, he beat her up, she lost a significant amount of weight.
It is this period of her life, May 2020, when detectives pinpoint the moment Kerry appears at most risk. It's a moment she reconnects with an old school friend through social media.
Kerry connected with Bennett online, and that's because A, he was a familiar face, they'd gone to high school together, despite not being that close, but B, also the fact that this was just another person for her to feel some warmth from. He was from the same area as her, he lived near her family, so he kind of felt like a safe bet.
Sort of thought, well, here we go again. No, here's this guy. But he did come across okay. He was in contact with Lisa a lot. A little bit of a pest, but he was also a way of Lisa keeping contact with Kerry.
He did go to the same school as us. He drank in the same local pub that we drink in, but I'd never actually crossed paths with him. So he was 38 and she was the same age but a year above him at school. Kerry introduced him to me over the telephone and she seemed happy, he seemed nice, she seemed happy.
Obviously she didn't have the children, she hadn't got work. A lot of her friends had sort of, I wouldn't say disappeared, but had distanced themselves from the situation. So yeah, she craved the company.
When Kerry meets Ian, it's not entirely clear the exact diameters of their relationship. Most accounts suggest that this was predominantly a friendship, a companionship, though there is some suggestion that it involved an element of sort of friends with benefits, but this was not someone that Kerry was looking to be in an exclusive relationship with by any means.
Murder Squad detectives build a picture of a man with few friends. In his 30s, he's still very close to Mum and Dad.
At this point, Ian Bennett is living with his parents. He doesn't have a huge social circle and is most often seen socialising with his father down at the pub.
He lived with his mother and father at home. It was quite peculiar. He had a very neat and tidy bedroom, which his mother clearly kept neat and tidy for him. I think there was an element of Ian never really ever growing up because he was always effectively a mummy's boy.
The mummy's boy seemed to detectives to need her approval for his new relationship with Kerry. Mum is seldom far away.
He used to invite her around to dinner and his mum used to invite her around to dinner. His mum used to pick her up from her flat and take her to their house so that she could have dinner with them. She told me they'd become quite fond of Kerry. She was definitely on, or seemed to be on, positive steps to recovery.
Whilst Kerry's not necessarily treating this as a serious relationship, it does seem that Ian Bennett is seeing it as such, because He's really getting involved in her life. He's in contact with her family. He's assuring them that he's looking after her. He's even positioning himself as this kind of saviour for her, saying that he's the best thing that's ever happened to her.
Lisa is unable to meet her sister's new companion because of the pandemic, but she tells detectives that Bennett knew all about Kerry's addiction issues.
He was absolutely aware of vulnerabilities because I told him about them, but he said he wanted to help her.
Bennett has his own issues, ones that his family characterised with an affectionate term used to lessen moments of anger.
All of his family members said that Ian Bennett suffered from something called Walter moments. And they described Walter moments as being something that he had suffered from being a very, very young child. And they'd learnt to manage these moments that he had. And the way they did that was to effectively appease him, follow instruction, and not allow him to get angry, and then you wouldn't have a reaction and a Walter moment.
Bennett originally presents himself to Kerry as a recovering alcoholic, and he offers support to help her too. And again, it kind of feeds into this idea that he's positioning himself in this saviour role.
I think he thought that he could help her.
He'd been a cocaine user in the past. All the experts agreed about this, that he suffered from a paranoid personality disorder, a borderline personality disorder, coupled with a depressive illness, and couple that with somebody who has an alcohol problem. And that is a toxic, lethal combination.
Because of his behaviour just a few weeks into their relationship, Ian Bennett has become police suspect number 1 in the murder of Kerry Woolley.
Weeks into the relationship, he became possessive. He didn't want anyone to go near her. He said if old boyfriends or anything had contacted her, then he would kill them. He thought he was the best thing that had ever happened to her.
He's becoming very possessive of her, even though they are not in an exclusive relationship, nor does Kerry have any intention to be.
Police learn of Ian Bennett's capacity for jealousy. Friends and family reveal the concerning events of Kerry and Ian's nights out.
The first thing that really got my attention to his behaviour was on the Friday night.
Kerry Woolley and Ian Bennett went out to the local pub. They met up with a couple and they drank alcohol. I think Kerry Woolley had had about a bottle of wine by that stage and they shared it.
They go back to the couple's flat for more drinks. The evening takes a turn for the worse.
Ian had gone to get some more drinks from the local petrol station, and apparently while he was gone, Kerry had cheated on him. The reason he thought that was because she had taken her jumper off. She had a vest top on underneath, and he'd come back and she'd got this vest top on, and that was his reason for thinking she'd cheated on him.
You saw her sitting there in a vest and started losing it. You're having an affair, you're cheating on me.
And unbeknownst to Kerry at this point, along with drinking, Bennett's also consuming quite a lot of cocaine.
She took her jumper off because it was summer, and she had a vest on underneath. She wasn't naked, she wasn't undressed. He just seemed to lose it.
Bennett's just becoming more and more paranoid. All Kerry's done is remove her jumper, and he takes that as a sign that she's having an affair with the woman that they're at the pub with. This is someone whose paranoia is escalating out of control. He's also disinhibited by the alcohol and drugs that he's taken that night, and all of this is spiralling into this paranoid crash.
He came across as very insecure at that point. Just insecure and jealous.
This paranoid mood that Bennett was putting himself into continues escalating, and when Kerry and Bennett get back to her home, he starts lashing out violently. He's again getting paranoid about this infidelity that he's perceiving, and during this argument he picks up the TV remote, throws it at Kerry's TV and damages it. So he's becoming increasingly physically violent during this argument, and it's all stemming from this paranoia about this perceived wrongdoing.
Bennett leaves Kerry's flat and on the way home contacts Lisa.
It started on text message, and then it turned into a phone call because it was very late. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. was angry. He was very angry. He was walking home, and he basically said to me that what he felt like doing was throwing himself in front of a train. He had to walk past the train station to get home, and he felt like throwing himself in front of a train.
Kerry tells friends that the evening's incidents make her sister want to end the relationship.
She just didn't think that it was what she needed in her life.
Kerry's talking to her friends and is saying that she feels that Bennett's becoming quite controlling, that he wants more from this friendship than she does, and that actually she's going to call it off. She doesn't want to see him anymore, and instead she just wants to focus on her recovery. And not only that, but she's planning to tell him.
She was cutting back on her drinking. She was reconnecting with the children. And I think she'd actually finally accepted that having those types of people in her life, it wasn't the way forward. So actually, it was like, yes, Kerry, we've turned that corner. And it was just a shame that within hours of that conversation, it had all gone horribly, horribly wrong.
It was the following afternoon. They both seemed they'd sorted out what had happened.
So events unfolded with Saturday the 12th of July. There were messages between them to suggest that everything was okay again.
They spoke about the television and told me how he was going to replace the television. But yeah, they seemed absolutely fine. I think it was about 4:30 on the Saturday afternoon.
On Saturday 11th of July, Kerry and Ian spend the evening together.
The last we see of Kerry Woolley is some photographs of her and Ian Bennett looking very happy together as a couple, and those she posted on her Facebook.
I just know that she was okay, and they asked me not to tell my parents what had happened the night before.
However, just 24 hours later, Ian Bennett is back on the phone to Lisa.
He contacted me the following day and asked if I'd spoken to Kerry, and I hadn't, and he went on to tell me how they'd had another row that night, and she was annoyed with him because he'd left her house at 1 o'clock in the morning, so this is 1 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and gone home, and she was annoyed with him for doing that. He sounded normal on that call. The following day I received a message from him at about 2:30 on the afternoon, asking if either me or my parents had spoken to Kerry that day. We hadn't. I think I then asked him if he'd spoken to her, and he hadn't either.
And the response of the family was effectively to say, well, don't panic too much. She may have just had a bit too much alcohol, and when she's feeling a bit better and she's around, she may be in touch. So the alarm was not raised.
Next thing then was a message that I received about an hour later, and he told me that he'd gone into the flat, the door was unlocked. He'd walked in and it looked like Kerry had been attacked, and there was blood everywhere, and he thought she was dead.
Yes, ambulance.
When we got to the apartment, the police and ambulances were already there. Until that point, I don't think we really believed what he was saying. But once we saw the blue tape and the police and the ambulances, we knew it was serious.
Never forget turning the corner into that road. The amount of emergency services was... It looked like there was a riot. And I'll never forget the policeman's face. He was just... He just kind of shook his head. And Lisa said... Is she dead? And the officer says there is somebody deceased in the apartment.
Okay, no problem.
And we could see Ian Bennett outside the front of the apartment.
Your mind starts racing with you. And I sort of don't recall Ian Bennett standing there. But he was still with us outside the doors of the flat. And I felt sorry for him. Thought, what's that poor bugger walked into?
I suppose it crosses your mind, did he do it? But because of the relationship, and I call it a relationship, if it was phone conversations. Maybe I didn't want to believe it was him.
I left hers this morning.
Here?
Yeah, we was having a few drinks. I left her at 1. Mum and Dad had a big argument at home, so I went home last night to
Ian Bennett denies being a killer. Has he made a mistake? Detectives trawl CCTV footage.
The CCTV captured Ian Bennett leaving Miss Woolley's house in the early hours of the morning with a carrier bag.
Police trace Bennett's movements back to his parents' house with the carrier bag. They soon hear a version of events from Bennett's mother explaining why his clothes worn that day were cleaned.
She was awoken by Ian in the early hours of the morning, and he asked to speak to her, and they were just chatting, and she gave him a Coke, and he spilt the Coke on his jacket, so she washed his jacket in the washing machine. Ian asked his mother whether or not he could go for a drive.
Linda Bennett will tell detectives that she recognised her son's behaviour.
She was concerned that he was about to have a Walter moment and wanted to keep him calm, and therefore when he said, "Shall we go for a drive?" she then agreed, and he gave directions of where he wanted to go, and she followed, and she stopped the car wherever he asked her to stop the car. He was then caught on his mother's dash cam, which showed him throwing an object into water. And then they drove a short distance, and he left the vehicle with the bag, and came back to the vehicle without the bag.
Has a killer made a mistake? One caught on camera. Through his search history, detectives learn that Bennett has been angry with Kerry for days.
Bennett's clearly intent on revenge. He Googles how to get revenge on a woman. You know, he's really committed to the fact that he's going to get revenge, and he's actively trying to plan that out.
The dash cam, his search history, police suspicions about his behaviour at the murder scene. The evidence is adding up.
Bennett is really trying to feign a lot of emotion when the police are there. He stages a call to his mom to break the news of Kerry's death.
Yeah, police, ambulance. Gotta be right now. Hold on.
What we actually can see is that not a lot of it is genuine, and the police pick up on that.
The next thing I really remember is he's put into the back of a police car and arrested for murder.
So you've got to listen to what I'm about to say to you, it's quite important. So the time is 4:40, you can be under arrest for murder at this time, okay? You didn't have murder. It's a suspicion at the moment, okay, based on obviously what's happened here.
I think they may have handcuffed him, walked him round, put him in the back of the car. Thoughts that were going through my head were, how on earth were we going to tell her children? How on earth were we going to tell 2 small children that their mum had been killed?
Ian Bennett's mother, who's arrived at the scene to support her son, is also arrested.
Where are you going? So at the moment we'll be going to custody. I don't know which custody, I'll let you know. I'm possibly going to be Coventry, hopefully. I've enjoyed it, yeah.
Both Mum and Ian Bennett are brought into the custody suite together, and the prosecution case was that Mum was lip-syncing to Ian Bennett, dash count. The officers then went off to look at the vehicle, and then they obtained the dashcam footage which showed and captured Ian Bennett disposing of items from Kerry Woolley's flat. But for Mum saying that to Ian Bennett, that dashcam may never have been found.
The dashcam reveals that when Linda Bennett takes Ian for a drive in the early hours of the 12th of July, the purpose isn't, as she claims, to calm him down.
The first stop was by the canal, where Ian was captured on footage disposing of an object. It transpired to be that was one of the knives, because when the canal was dredged up, that is what they found. They then stopped in a wooded area nearby.
Kerry's blood-stained wallet is later recovered in this woodland.
And the third stop was not really a stop, but it was a sort of pause in the area outside Kerry Woolley's flat. And obviously the prosecution case was that Ian wanted to go past to see whether or not anyone had discovered Kerry's body.
Prosecutors line up their evidence to prove a charge of murder and begin with the ferocity of the attack.
Bennett subjects Kerry to a prolonged, extreme level of violent attack. It's excessive. He uses 2 different knives. He also strangles her.
Something must have happened in that flat which triggered Ian Bennett that evening, and it seems to suggest that it was something that happened in a short period of time. But a combination of alcohol and a question mark over whether or not cocaine had been taken as well, combined with what was then accepted later on in the case by all of the experts, which is the personality disorders that Ian suffered from, was effectively a toxic cocktail which resulted in the killing of Kerry Woolley.
A loss of control might indicate a mental state, which may see a jury convict on a charge of manslaughter and not murder.
Ian Bennett's case was that he had no recollection of what happened in the flat, but he accepted that when one looked at an inference from all the circumstances, he may have been responsible for the killing. But the second limb of his defence was, if I was responsible for the killing, then at the time of the killing I was suffering from an abnormality of mental reasoning, so I didn't really know what I was doing, because for that short moment I lost all ability to reason and mind.
Even though this level of violent attack might suggest an element of loss of control from Bennett, we know that that's not the case, because not only does he stop midway through the attack to get a second weapon, but also he creates an alibi for himself immediately afterwards.
Kerry Woolley had sustained 55 stab wounds. Substantial part of them, and I think over 30 were around the neck area, and the remaining were all over her body.
Bennett begins this conscious campaign to get away with murder.
But police are confident Bennett won't get away with it. They've gathered enough evidence to charge Linda Bennett too, and defence and prosecution begin the long task of preparing for trial.
Both mother and son were tried together, because mother was tried with assisting an offender in committing the act of murder.
Refusing to admit guilt, the Bennetts subject Kerry's family to yet more trauma, forcing them to sit through a 16-day trial, listening to all of the graphic details just feet away from the Bennetts.
It was just the worst thing you can ever imagine having to go through. It's just unbelievable. I can't believe what he did, and I can't believe her, as his mother, covered up for him.
Is that his mother? She got so involved to such an extent, and the ending was planned. She washed his clothes, she drove around, 3 different locations, she gave me alibi, and then they'd done a drive-by in the morning, the Sunday morning, to see if she'd been found.
I think there was an element of Ian never really ever growing up, because he was always effectively a mummy's boy, and that might be one of the reasons why he ended up in the situation where he ended up getting his mother to assist him, and his mother felt that she could not say no.
Ian Bennett's defence centres on his history of behavioural problems going back to childhood. His defence barrister, Narita Barra, calls expert witnesses to try and explain Bennett's amnesia.
We turn to the psychiatrists and the psychologists who are very experienced and have dealt with numerous cases of murder over the years.
The prosecution in the trial accept that Bennett suffers mental health issues, including paranoid personality disorder, but they claim that Bennett had brought that on himself by abusing drugs and alcohol.
The jury returned verdicts, and those verdicts were guilty on all counts for both defendants, Ian Bennett and Mrs. Bennett, and Ian received life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 25 years. years.
Bennett's ultimate mistake was in carelessly creating a record of his movements, which led police to the murder weapon.
Life is life. But it's not, is it? It's not, and although he's there and we're told that he won't ever be coming out, he's still breathing. He still has contact with his family. Kerry's family don't have that. Kerry's friends don't have that. It all just seems very, very unfair.
I don't think I saw the breakdown till it was too late.
Camera evidence from Bennett's own mother and reading her lips when mouthing dash cam shows him to be a liar and places his mother in the frame for charges related to the killing.
And his mother received a custodial sentence of 3 years for assisting him.
I feel angry. I feel an element of guilt. Thinking, why didn't I do more? We remember the family holidays, family barbecues. Her family were everything to her. The early morning phone calls that at the time used to drive me mad, but if I could speak to her one more time at 7 o'clock in the morning while she was driving to work, I'd do that. We just remember the good times.
You just start to remember the old times and a laugh and things like that, and that's what you got to grab onto. Can't remember the old Kerry or anything you saw in court. Just remember that bubbly, gorgeous girl who would turn heads in the pub.